Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we're going to be installing the wireless light prototype on the Hercules Hobbies Reefer. A few weeks ago, well actually probably a few months ago by now, we fitted the LEDs to the rear and the doors on the box under the chassis. If you want to catch up on that, I'll pop a link in the description. Also, it'll probably make it to the suggested videos on the right too, if YouTube's paying attention. So we can get at the end of the wires, we'll need to remove the base from the box. It makes it a lot easier to access things and get the lengths just right. It's held on with 4 self-tappers near the edge and the 2 right in the centre. With the screws out, the base lifts out fairly easily. The paint can make it stick a bit, but with a good tug it will come free. We've got 2 lots of wires in the box. The bundle towards the back has the cathodes, or negative connections for the rear LEDs on the small wires, and a single large wire which is the common anode, or positive. In the centre there's also a few wires for the LEDs in the doors. Blue-purple for the anodes, and the black wires are the cathodes. There's already resistors fitted to the LEDs. You can see some of them with the door LEDs, so wiring today is going to be rather simple. Here's the board that's going to go in the trailer. This is only a prototype and it's a bit on the large side. The main concern is the thickness, with the radio module on the top and the BEC on the bottom, but hopefully it will fit somewhere. The LED connections are identical to the main light controller. It mirrors the outputs. So when the brake lights come on the controller, the wireless module sets its output to match. All we need to do is solder the wires to one of these connectors, plug it in, and off it should go. To keep things nice and tidy, we'll need some heat shrink, some small stuff for the small wires, not just for insulation, but also for stress relief so the wires don't fatigue and break at the joints. We'll also need some bigger heat shrink for the big wire and to run all the wires through to keep them neat. Now, because all the wires that go to the rear are black, we're going to need a way to figure out which is which. We could get the power supply out, or perhaps use a battery. But if you have a meter with a diode test mode, it makes things a lot easier. There's a few meters around that don't supply enough voltage to light up white LEDs, but this one does, so it's going to make things nice and quick to figure out which wire goes where. Before we get to the soldering, we're going to need to pop some of the large heat shrink over the rear wire bundle. Once we start soldering, we're not going to be able to get it on. We only need a couple of bits around 1 centimetre long. If you cover all the wire, it's going to become very stiff, and you're going to risk stressing the joints at the ends. Now it's just a case of rigging up the connector in some pliers so it's nice and stable. We can strip a nice length of insulation from the large anode wire and wrap it around the positive meter probe. Now we can quickly test the small wires with a negative probe and see which LED lights up at the back of the trailer. You can't see them here, but they are lighting up. Before we solder them to the connector, we'll need some short lengths of the thin heat shrink over all the small wires so they're ready to push up over the joints later. To make it easy to see which pins are which, I'm going to use the light controller, which hopefully has the pin out on the silkscreen. All we do is test the wire, match it up with the pin out and solder it to the connector. Rinse and repeat a few times, and we just need to cut the anode wire, strip it and solder it to the other side. All the pins on this side go to the same place, so it doesn't matter which ones we solder to. In fact, it makes sense to solder across a couple of the pins so you've got a bit of extra contact when the connector's plugged in. The door lights aren't any different. The cathode pair simply solders to the aux1 connection and the anodes to one of the pins on the positive side of the connector. With the soldering done, we can use a heat gun to shrink the heat shrink, making sure it's pushed up over the solder joints as far as it can go. Plug it into the wireless board, and other than sticking it down with a bit of servo tape, it's ready to go. The other piece of the puzzle is of course the transmitter. It's really simple to install. All the light controllers have a 6-pin expansion connector. The early ones were an open 6 pins, and the latest controller has a nice box header to help getting the connector the right way round. All we do is plug the ribbon into the controller and the other end into the transmitter, and that's it, job's done. The transmitter board even has an extra connector, so you can daisy chain another expansion as they become available. The only other thing to consider is the blue widget on the board, which is a rotary switch with 16 positions. As long as the transmitter and the receiver match, they're going to communicate happily. I haven't decided whether to keep the switch or change it for a bind type setup, more like a Spectrum radio. I'm not sure, but I think there's something nice about having a physical switch to set. Right, time to power it up and make sure it's working as it's supposed to. We can connect up the battery to the truck and turn on the ESC. Now I've got the drive axles off the ground so it can't actually go anywhere. You can actually see the status LEDs on the transmitter reflected in the diamond plate. Green means it's powered up and the red flashing one means it's waiting for data. If we blip the throttle forward, the main light controller will arm itself, turning on the lights, and it starts sending out the data. The transmitter's now only got the green light, so it's actively transmitting. On the trailer, I'm going to use that 2S LiPo I got for the Henglong B1. It's nice and small, so it's going to fit nicely in the trailer box. As soon as we plug it into the receiver, it will power up, and if the transmitter's transmitting, we should get a solid green LED. Okay, moving around the back, we can see that the brake lights are on, so something's happening. If I change the lighting mode using the RC transmitter, you can see the running lights on the truck and the trailer coming on together. The brakes and reverse light seem to be working quite nicely, but strictly speaking, I don't think the trailer should really have the reversing lights, but I like them anyway. That just leaves the indicators, which also seem to be working. Okay, great stuff. So now we've given it a quick test, we can unplug the batteries and refit the bottom plate on the trailer box. It's just the same 6 self-tappers we took out at the beginning. Pop them back in and we can head outside for a proper test. Right now the system doesn't know when the trailer's attached or not, so the lights are active all the time. The transmitter board has a 2-pin connector that's designed to go to a switch in the coupler. Now, Tamiya supply one when you buy their all singing all dancing light kits, and they do sell them as spares for nearly 15 quid a pop. So I need to find a compatible switch from a source where I can buy a few at a time. £1 each would be okay, but they should be available for well under that. If I can find a suitable switch, the trailer will know when it's not coupled and disable the trailer lights. Other than that, it seems to be working fairly well for a prototype. I've got the motorised legs getting power through the receiver board too, but I didn't record fitting that as it's a bit of a bodge just for testing. It looks like we've got some transients from the motor on startup though, as it seems to be resetting the lights. Not great, but an easy fix when adding the electronics to drive the legs remotely. It's all slow progress, but a little at a time we are getting there. Anyway, that's going to be about it for this week, so thanks for watching. Like if you liked, subscribe if you're not already, and if you've got something on your mind, by all means leave a comment. Bye guys!